You need to know what happened in Afghanistan in the 1980s. Afghan guerrillas called the Mujahideen fought a Soviet occupation for 9 years. They even got money and weapons from the CIA. In 1989, the Soviets pulled out, and the next few years were pretty chaotic. By 1992, there was a full-blown civil war with tribal leaders fighting for power. 2 years later, a militia called the Taliban started getting attention. Many of its members had studied in conservative religious schools in Afghanistan and across the border in Pakistan, and some of them had also fought as Mujahideen. And they had their own plans for the country.
The people were so frustrated with this lawlessness, and the Taliban came marching along from Kandahar to city to city to city, saying, we're gonna make the cities safe for you again.
By 1996, the Taliban had seized the capital. They declared Afghanistan an Islamic emirate and started imposing their own strict interpretation of Islamic law.
They were like, you can't watch movies, you can't listen to music, women can't go to school, and other than doctors, they can't go to work. You have to wear a certain type of clothes, you have to have a certain kind of beard, it just became more and more restrictive.
Then 9/11 happened. The US was after al-Qaeda's leader Osama bin Laden, who was hiding out in Afghanistan with the Taliban's help. The Taliban said they wanted proof he was behind the attack, and when they refused to hand him over immediately, the Americans invaded.
The Taliban will pay a price.
Within a couple of months, the Taliban were forced out of power, and Afghanistan got a new interim government. 3 years later, it got a new constitution, and Hamid Karzai was elected president. While that was going on, the Taliban had regrouped. They wanted foreigners out, and they wanted back in. What followed were years of devastating conflict, and it's still going on. More than 40,000 Afghan civilians killed, at least 64,000 Afghan military and police, and more than 3,500 international soldiers dead. The US alone has spent almost $1 trillion on the war and reconstruction projects. And after all that, Afghanistan is still deeply unstable, and the Taliban are still a force to reckon with.
They're an insurgency fighting international occupation as they see it. They're fighting an illegitimate government in Kabul as they see it. And they're a voice of resistance to, as they see it, return Afghanistan to a more pure Islamic society.
Today, the Taliban have as many as 85,000 full-time fighters and training camps across the country, and the area they control has been growing. Right now, the Taliban control 1/5 of Afghan districts. On top of that, half of all districts are considered contested, which means the Taliban have a strong presence in many of those places too. And they control parts of some major highways.
Whoever controls the roads in Afghanistan, pretty much controls the country. They've managed to basically give people the sense that, wherever you go, you'll have to deal with the Taliban.
They're also well organized. The Taliban's leader is Haibatullah Akhundzada. He heads a council that oversees about a dozen commissions in charge of things like finance, health, and education. Below them are local officials in charge of everyday services. So in a way, the Taliban have set up a parallel state. They even run their own courts, which can be pretty popular among Afghans.
Justice has been a huge gap in Afghanistan, and where the state courts have failed, these Sharia courts are able to come into communities who may even be reticent to support the Taliban, but they offer justice.
All that control has also made them rich. According to Taliban members and a UN committee, they make close to $1.5 billion a year. They've always made a lot of money from growing opium poppies and the drug trade, but they found even more ways to generate income. Last year, they made millions from mining and trading minerals and even producing methamphetamine. They also have their own tax collection system and receive funding from abroad, although suspected sources like Pakistan and Iran deny it. Over the years, the international community has tried to get the Taliban and the Afghan government talking, or at least to talk about talking. There was even a meeting in the Maldives at one point. And during a brief Eid ceasefire in 2018, Taliban and Afghan soldiers were seen mingling in Kabul, even praying together. But overall, peace negotiations haven't achieved much.
The Ghani government has been incredibly antagonistic and sees the Taliban as a real existential threat to everything that they represent.
The Taliban have been quite adamant on their demand that they want the re-establishment of their regime that was toppled by the US intervention.
The question now is, what will happen when the roughly 10,000 US and NATO soldiers leave? Will the Afghan government be able to survive? And what will the Taliban do? Well, the prospects for peace and stability aren't looking great. Even while peace talks have been going on, almost 1,800 Afghan civilians have been killed or injured in the first 3 months of this year. That's almost 30% more than last year. There's also been a wave of assassinations that people blame on the Taliban.
Targeted killings continue. Civilian government workers, employees, but also activists and journalists.
It's to make people feel less and less safe, less and less secure, to sort of send back the message repeatedly that your government is not protecting you.
Afghans are already asking themselves what life might be like if the Taliban take over again. Will they rip up the constitution, which protects basic human rights?
Will women be able to travel without a male guardian? Will women be able to be judges? Will a woman be able to run for president? There's a lot that is ambiguous and unknown.
In a New York Times op-ed, the Taliban tried to clear things up, saying they want to build an Islamic system where the rights of women that are granted by Islam, from the right to education to the right to work, are protected. And right now, there are some places under Taliban control where girls are in school, but not everywhere.
It's really localized. I mean, in some areas, we know that the local commanders are a bit more flexible when it comes to women's education. In some areas, they are not at all.
So how much support is there for the Taliban? Well, according to a major public opinion study done in 2019, 85% of people said they had no sympathy for them.
I've traveled to a large proportion of this country. The vast majority of people I speak to don't have a favorable view of the Taliban.
و اما اون طالبه که در ذهن من کابوس بد و خوابهای شیرین کودکانه مرا به یک خاطرات تلخ مبدل ساخته هرگز نمیپذیرم.
People may not like them, but the Taliban know what they want, and they've shown that they're in it for the long haul. So far, their strategy seems to have worked.